The emperor of a faraway land has a plan to conquer the world. His legions are massing, his mages are preparing, and soon he will strike. But he will take no chances in his bid for power, and he wishes to be assured of success. So in secret, a squad of his soldiers has taken the famed chief cartographer of the Red Quills and taken him to that faraway capital. In the Emperor's personal library, he's being forced to create the first accurate world map with the legendary skills of that guild. With that map, the Emperor's forces would strike with incredible accuracy, and without warning, it would be a significant tool in his arsenal. A group of adventurers has been sent to retrieve the cartographer, rescue him from the palace of the Emperor, and return him home with the map safely in hand. Hello adventurers, and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan, and today I'm sitting down to make the first full and complete map of my world. Now, I know I'm a map making channel, and I've been exploring this world with my players for over 5 years now. It's almost criminal that I actually haven't made one yet. But there is a reason for that, and now that I'm doing it, I want to do it right. A map of the world doesn't seem like much. It's a mere novelty, an interesting insight into the way that the world is made. They don't tend to hold power or knowledge of earth-shaking importance or tell the reader how to achieve some arcane inheritance. But maps do have a power of a certain kind and are of great use to the powerful. Today, I'm going to show you what I'm making, how I'm making it, and how I'm going to bring it into the game as a powerful world-building tool that it is, so that you can create world maps of your own for your own Dungeons & Dragons campaigns. Let's look at making a world map. This year, I'm working on creating the Atlas of Endon, which is my attempt to make a cohesive setting from all of the locations that my players have explored over the campaign of the last 5 years. It includes a great many places, incredible amounts of lore and history, and no small amount of creativity. But even then, despite the dozens of towns, hundreds of dungeons and ruins and sites, and 10,000 square miles of kingdom, they have also had to venture far overseas in search of answers in previous quests. The Kingdom of Endon is filled with lore, but it's still only one small part of a much larger world, a world that I have attempted as much as possible to fill with details, implications, and nudges towards revelations about the truth of history. But to this day, I have not made an actual world map. Despite literally hundreds of charts and maps and overviews, I've not attempted to actually sit down and put all of the world's locations into one piece of paper. The reasoning for this should be obvious. There's so much detail in a world map that it's practically useless for anything other than charting a course across the globe. And it has to imply so many things that you generally have to either spend hundreds of hours working through an incredibly complex history, taking different cultures, mythologies, and conflicts into account, deliberately leave things vague, or use real-life cultures as a sort of placeholder to give you some inspiration when you get there. But more importantly than anything else, I never really needed one. I have several hundred maps of the Kingdom of Endon itself, about 150 miles long and 100 miles wide, and a map of an area roughly the size of the Mediterranean for when they have needed to go further afield. But before they reached the higher levels, that kingdom was more than enough for them, particularly when you take the caverns of the Underdark beneath it into account. However, they're growing adventurers, getting a little too big for the tiny kingdom that they once called home, and like hermit crabs, they have to find a bigger shell to call their home. So in this series, I've been slowly preparing myself for their voyages out of the gentle waters that we know in the best way that I know how, by making some maps. So today I'll map the world of the Kingdom of Endon, Aurea. I've done any number of styles of map in the past, and one of the first hurdles that a map maker needs to think about is what style of map to use. If I'm mapping the world, how do I show it? And there are always implications for whatever style you use. Whenever you make a map, you have to consider who is going to be using it. The maps we make here are always for the map maker's benefit first and foremost. After all, the process of making a map is a great tool for sharpening the world building. But weathered maps or incomplete maps are great to give to players because they give you more flexibility if you want to add anything later. But in this case, I recently made a weathered and ancient world map and filled it with inaccuracies and shortcomings. So this is a map that I will make which will show the world roughly as it is and be usable for navigation. It's a little beyond the technology of my world, which we'll get into in a moment, but I can explain that in-game by way of the amazing processes of the red quills. In the particular fantasy world that I place my game in, the red quills is the name of the cartography guild, which is fun. So, when thinking about world maps, consider just how long they've been around in our history. The first world map we know of is Babylonian from around 600 BCE. It's carved into stone and, it is worth noting, but no shade to them, it's fairly inaccurate. The maps that followed for the next few hundred years in the same area showed the world as being fairly round and surrounded by water. Generally, they were pretty clear on the idea that there were only three great continents: Europe, Asia, and Libya. And the conquests of Alexander the Great only improved their map making. Most of the depictions of the world that came after that we wouldn't really recognize as being a map, but it was nearly 2,000 years later that we started getting actual world maps, with Latin maps around 1000 CE showing more of what we'd recognize while still being barely accurate. But it's not until around the 15th century, 1400, in Italy, that we begin to get maps that are even remotely accurate or appear to be the same as what the world actually looks like. And even the first real globe in 1492 doesn't include the Americas. You have to wait until Ortelius in 1570 for a real map. All of which isn't necessary to know how to make a map, but as someone who tries to give the players things which would make sense in world, I find it helpful to know how accurate the maps would be for the level of advancement in a fantasy world. I mean, they certainly wouldn't have a Mercator map, which is what I'm going to be making here. In this house, we love Gerard Mercator and what he did for navigation, but it should be noted that it is also technically not an accurate map. The brilliance of the Mercator map is that it takes into account the curvature of the Earth so that a sea captain can plot a straight line course from any 2 points on the surface and be sure of arriving where they want to be. So it's a great map for the navigation for your players. It's also the most recognizable version of the world map. So let's talk about how to make one of these Mercator maps. A Mercator map should technically be just about square, but most of the versions that we're familiar with cut out the mainly useless part, which includes Antarctica. So we tend to use a rectangular portion. And while I could faff around and try to make the distortion as accurate to the Mercator map as possible, I don't really want my brain to fall out from all that maths, so I'm going to eyeball it. And believe me when I tell you that the brilliance of the Mercator map is that it reduces some incredibly complex mathematics down to something you can just look at. I'm going to start with a blank sheet of paper and then use the other maps that I've made previously as a reference to add in some continents. It's worth noting that I need to take into account that the distortion of this map and the deliberate inaccuracies in previous maps give me a little leeway in preparing them all together so that they can be joined properly. I'm going to keep the color palette pretty simple for this map. I'm going to use black fineliners for the physical landmarks, red for the continents, regions, and major cities, and then blue for the ocean, as well as the latitudinal lines, 12, between each of them 2 hours of the day and night cycle, the equator, and the tropics. And yes, my world does have an axial tilt which creates the seasons. I've named the tropics after the constellations from last week's map. Then later on I'm going to use some of the special pens from the Shop of Many Things to add in some secret details that I can reveal later, and to give you all some inspiration for the kinds of things that you can include in your world maps. Once I've gone through and outlined the world, I'll use the elemental ink pens which vanish when heat is applied to create a vanishing continent. Oh yeah, I'm keen. It's going to be super cool. And the other addition that I'm going to make here is ley lines. And I've mentioned them in previous maps occasionally, but now that my players are getting very big and very important, I'm going to add ley lines to this map, which are irregular curves that hug the planet, that the wizard can use to calculate teleportation circle symbols at the junctions of those ley lines. Where the lines intersect, if the wizard has the map and the lines, he can use some arcane maths to determine what the teleportation coordinates are. And it's a really easy way, if I give him this map, of getting him out into the world and gives them a sense of achievement rather than just handing them information that they need. So, as I'm adding in details, let's talk about how I'm introducing this map to my players after 5 years of playing in this world and what hurdles they would need to jump through in order to make use of it. So let's tell a story about this. Adventurers tend only to use maps as a vague guide. After all, their calling is to delve to the forgotten places of the world, venture out into the unknown, track their quarry through the wildernesses. All of the things that they defend against make their territories in the borders of the maps, and rarely in the picturesque fields of the map's centers. The officers of the Red Quill's Cartographic Society does a great deal of business with mercenaries, warriors, and explorers in their ongoing quest to map as much of the world as possible. Funded by the crown and patronized by the elite, their reputation as navigators, historians, and diplomats is unrivaled. The charts and maps that the Red Quills creates are hailed as being the most accurate in the world, and their cartographers take great pains to make certain that all the information is credible before being added. While the masses do not take much notice of the accuracy of maps, there are those who do. Those who need accurate maps to chart trade lines, plan for wars, and navigate vessels across vast distances. The people in charge of the world care a great deal about accurate maps. And the reputation of the Red Quills has gathered unwanted attention. Recently, the chief cartographer of the Red Quills in Endon has been taken by the legions of the Saturnorian Empire. Their emperor, keen to spread his influence across the known world, wants accurate charts to allow his forces to strike quickly, efficiently, and without warning. The Red Quills is known for its accurate maps, but the explorers of the Saturnorian Empire have ventured to every corner of the globe, and this cartographer now has access to every chart they ever made. Making them into a map of the world is his dream, and the Emperor does not need to threaten him to get what he wants. A group of adventurers has been sent to venture into the heart of that hostile empire, rescue the cartographer, and come back, either with the map safely in hand, or with it left behind in ashes. So that's what I think of and how I would make use of a world map. I know that I'm more obsessed with maps than most, but I think that they serve as a solid world-building tool, the object of a great quest as well as an immersive aid. And in the end, I've created a map of Araya that references a lot of previous maps, allows for inaccuracies, and stitches together a great many projects. It can be used for mundane navigation, arcane teleportation, and hiding of even more secrets, in the form of the phasing continent, Talian Sud. And you can do a world map however often and in whatever style you like, but the Mercator map is one that's quite recent and very recognizable. If you want to do earlier styles or inaccurate styles that allow you more wiggle room in improvising the world later on, I would suggest looking to history for inspiration. Now, once again, I was so pleased to be able to work with the tools from the Shop of Many Things for this map. In this case, I actually used both of the tools they sent me for this series. The Elemental Ink Pen for the Disappearing Islands of Tallien soot, which will vanish when heat is applied and reappear in the cold, and the Moonlight pens for the enigmatic ley lines for teleportation. Both pens can be found in the description below, and if you use the links below, you can get a special discount code, grab the pens for free, and only pay for shipping. I'm also really pleased to be affiliated with the Shop of Many Things, so if you shop around there and grab a couple more things while you're there, you'll be helping me out here at the Red Quills. Let me know what you're doing with your own world maps. I'd love to see them. Please, if you want to argue with me about Mercator maps, you can do it in the comments below, but it's much easier to do it on the Red Quills Discord. The link is in the description below. Please like and subscribe to help this video find more world builders, and let me know if you have any questions. And this map is available for free on the Red Quills Patreon. You can download it digitally. Check that out while you're there. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.